In this video, I will show you how to find the value of various trig functions given different types of information. So, for problem number 18, we need to sketch and find the values of all 6 trig functions when we're given the coordinates of a point on the terminal side of the angle. So, we are given an x and a y. Okay, so what you need to understand that one way to think of tangent, sine, and cosine is that sine of an angle is going to be y over r, where r is the radius. Okay, if you think of a point, so here we've got the point 4 comma negative 5, so that's going to be somewhere over here in the 4th quadrant. Okay, so imagine that this is the point 4 comma negative 5. The radius, alright, if you think of this as the radius of a circle, and that 4 comma negative 5 is on the circle, then that's the radius that I'm talking about when I say y over r. Cosine is x over r, and tangent is y over x. Okay? Now, of course, the other trig functions are reciprocals of these. Let's see, do they have these lined up nicely for us? Yes. Secant is just the reciprocal, cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. Secant is just the reciprocal of cosine, and cotangent is just the reciprocal of tangent. That's my wife calling. So if this is the terminal side of an angle that's passing through the point 4 comma negative 5, you can see that we could make a right triangle out of this. And the x-coordinate would be the length of this side of the triangle, and the y-coordinate would represent the vertical side of the triangle. So we would have to find the radius by using the Pythagorean theorem. So I'm going to ignore the negative sign because the radius has to be positive anyway. So you should be thinking 4 squared plus 5 squared is equal to the radius squared. So that's going to be 16 plus 25. So that's going to be 41. So r is going to be the square root of 41. So just remember what I said a minute ago about sine is y over r. So that's going to be negative 5 over radical 41. Alright, cosecant will be the reciprocal of that, so that should be negative radical 41 over 5. Cosine is x over r, so that should be 4 over radical 41. And secant is the reciprocal of that, so that'll be radical 41 over 4. And tangent is y over x, so that's going to be negative 5 over 4. And cotangent will be the reciprocal of that, so negative 4/5. Okay, number 19. Sketch and find the remaining 5 trig functions if the sine is negative 3 over 7. So they're giving us negative 3 over 7. This is going to be very similar to the last problem. Okay, we need x, we need y, and we need r to be able to do the trig functions. Now, sine is y over r. So they're telling us that y is negative 3 and r is 7. So we just need to figure out what x is. So all we need to do is the Pythagorean theorem. So you should be thinking x squared plus 3 squared Alright, I'm ignoring the negative sign for now. We'll deal with that later. X squared plus 3 squared is equal to 7 squared. Alright? So that's going to be x squared plus 9 is equal to 49. So x squared is equal to 40, subtracting 9 from both sides. So that means x is equal to the square root of 40. Okay, so that's going to be the square root of 4 times 10. So that's going to be 2 radical 10. So x is 2 radical 10, but be careful. The Pythagorean theorem is always going to give you a positive answer. You have to decide for yourself whether or not this should be negative. And that's determined by the quadrant. In the third quadrant, okay, I'm talking about quadrant 3 over here. X values are negative in this quadrant. So this has to be negative 2 radical 10. Do not leave it positive. So anyway, now we have x, y, and r. So we should be able to build all of the trig functions. Now, cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So that's just going to be negative 7 over 3. Cosine is x over r. So that's going to be negative 2 radical 10 over 7. So secant is going to be the reciprocal of this. So that's going to be 7 over negative 2 radical 10. Okay, when you have an extra number down here, you really need to rationalize the denominator. We can't leave it like this. So I think I'll do that off to the side. I'll erase this in a moment. So I have 7 over negative 2 radical 10. I want to rationalize the denominator, so I'm going to multiply by radical 10 in the top and the bottom. So that's going to make 7 radical 10 over. And now I have negative 2 times 10. Radical 10 times radical 10 is 10. So now I have negative 2 times 10, so that's negative 20. So in the end I have negative 7 radical 10 over 20. Okay, and that's really how you should write it. Anyway, tangent is y over x. So that's going to be negative 3 over negative 2 radical 10. Okay, negative 3 over negative 2 radical 10. First of all, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So we definitely will put a positive 3 and a positive 2 radical 10. And also, for the same reason I was talking about before, you really need to rationalize the denominator when there's an extra number there. Before I do that though, cotangent should be the reciprocal of this. So that's going to be 2 radical 10 over 3. So that's fine. Okay, but this one, I'm going to rationalize the denominator again. So 3 over 2 radical 10. If I multiply by radical 10, numerator and denominator, that's going to give me 3 radical 10 over 20 again. Okay, because again, this is 2 times 10. So I really should write this as 3 radical 10 over 20. Alright, so that's it for number 19. Okay, number 20 is almost the same thing. Alright, we need x, we need y, and we need r. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. And sine is y over r. So that means that cosecant is r over y. So when they give us this cosecant, this must be the r, and this must be the y. Alright, so r is radical 27, okay, and y is 5. So I just need to find x. And I will do that using the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so I should be thinking x squared plus 5 squared is equal to radical 27 squared. So that's going to be x squared plus 25 is equal to 27, because the radical goes away. Subtracting 25 from both sides, that's going to be x squared is equal to 2. Taking the square root of both sides, x is equal to the square root of 2. Except, maybe it should be negative though. That's going to be determined by the quadrant. They told us that we are in the second quadrant, that's here. Cosine, well, this is literally an x value, so x values are negative in the second quadrant. So I'm going to put negative radical 2 because of the quadrant. So now I should be able to find anything I want, but in this case they asked us to find cosine. So cosine is x over r. So that's going to be negative radical 2 over radical 27. Okay, we are definitely going to have to rationalize the denominator because we have a radical in the numerator and a radical in the denominator, so that's no good. So here's what I want to do though. So I have negative radical 2. First of all, radical 27 can be simplified. Alright, radical 27 is radical 9 times 3. So that's going to be negative radical 2. That's going to be 3 radical 3. So when I rationalize the denominator, this is what I'm really going to be rationalizing. Okay, so I'm going to multiply by radical 3 in the top and the bottom. So that's going to give me negative radical 6 over 9. Radical 3 times radical 3 is 3. Alright, so bringing this 3 down, that's 3 times 3. So I'm going to have 9. So this should really be your answer. Okay, now doesn't that look a lot better than negative radical 2 over radical 27? That's why you have to do it. So negative radical 6 over 9 is the better answer. Let's do one more problem. From a 45-foot observation tower on the coast, a Coast Guard officer sights a boat in difficulty. The angle of depression is 6 degrees. How far is the boat from the shore line? Okay, so this is the shore over here. Here's our observation tower. Alright, that's my observation tower. Okay, and this is the water. And here's my boat. Okay, there's my boat. So, when they talk about an angle of depression, alright, if you were to look straight out, then the angle of depression is going to be the difference between the horizontal line and where you're looking. Okay, so this is the angle of depression right here. This is the angle of depression. Now, if I were looking from the perspective of the boat, this would be the angle of elevation. All right? Notice that the angle of depression and the angle of elevation are the same. All right? These are alternate interior angles of parallel lines. These are the same. So what I like to do is, if they ask me for the angle of depression, I go ahead and find the angle of elevation, just because it's inside of this triangle, and so it helps students avoid the mistake of accidentally finding this angle up here. Some students will put the 6 right there where I put that X, and that's wrong, because that's not the angle of depression. The angle of depression is out here. So I encourage my students to just always go ahead and find the angle of elevation down here. That way, since they're the same, but this one is less ambiguous. No one's tempted to try to find some angle outside the triangles. So this is better. So we'll find this. 45-foot observation tower. So the tower is 45 feet tall. How far is the boat from the shore? Okay, so we're being asked to find this distance, the bottom of the triangle. So which trig function are we going to use? From the perspective of the angle, the 45 is the opposite leg, and the x is the adjacent leg. All right? The line of sight here is the hypotenuse, which we don't need. So we could use the tangent function, because tangent is opposite over adjacent. So we could say the tangent of 6 degrees is opposite over adjacent. So that would be 45 over x. When the variable is in the denominator, the easiest thing to do is just to swap these. So this is going to be x is equal to 45 over tangent 6. Okay? Now, all we have is a 4-function calculator, so we will have to leave our answer in this form. Okay? If you were allowed to use a calculator, you could just type this in your calculator and get an answer. I'm just going to do that just for fun. So x is about 428.15 feet. But on the test, this is what I would have expected you to give me. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. Go ahead and click here in the red apple to watch the next video. Click in the green apple to subscribe, or click the yellow apple for the full playlist.